It's a pleasure, Philip, to have you here tonight. We just had a really quick chat before we went online, and I'm really excited also personally tonight because your type of photography is something that I also feel personally very drawn towards, to action, working with people, working in advertising. So I'm excited that we're going to have a lot to talk about, and I'm going to hand this over to you now, Philip. Thanks for going to join. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Holger. That's great. Well, this is quite unusual for me. I'm not used to talking a lot about myself, so I'm going to get over that tonight and do a bit of talking about myself. First of all, the website is philipnorthcoombes.com. If you want to have a look while the talk's going on, and any images you'd like to chat about or discuss or find out what I did or how we came about to do it, please do that as we go along. Happy for you to ask any questions as we go along. I know Holger will let us know and we can answer any questions. For me I'm going to be reading as well as talking to you because I made some notes. So forgive me for that, but for me to turn an interest, a hobby, a creative outlet into a profession makes us very blessed. And often through the years, I've had to pinch myself on several occasions to think that I'm at a certain location doing this shoot for TUI or Speedo or anything like that. And you're on a beach in the middle of nowhere and you think I'm being paid to do here. And for those reasons, what we do is a blessing. And I'm very grateful for every year, every month I've spent in it. So I started a career in photography. I didn't study photography. I actually went in on a sort of apprenticeship basis. I literally started walking the streets of London, so to speak, and applying for assisting jobs and literally knocking on doors, calling photographers. We didn't have any mobiles at that time. And then eventually through the Association of Fashion and Editorial Photographers, which is now known as AOP, which is the Association of Photographers, they had a job line for assistants looking for work with photographers based in London. So I applied for a job with a photographer at the time, quite a known fashion photographer called Richard Imrie. And thankfully I got the position, which was fantastic. He worked in fashion, he traveled with his work, which was exactly the market I was looking for. If you decide you want to assist, which I think is quite important before you take the step to be a photographer, I would suggest you look at assisting people who are doing what you are interested in. Because then it relates a lot more to you. You can make the right connections. So finding a photographer in the field you're interested in is ideal to gain the experience you need. You learn about lighting, assisting, you learn about technical aspects, you make the contacts within the industry and working with clients, which is very important. So all these elements are part of assisting. And things you can pick up. And the main one really is getting in the industry, making the contacts, making the connections, getting to know the right people, get people to know you, because as soon as they know you and they like what they see, hopefully, then that sets you up on the right way to move forward. Personally, I assisted for 2 years.
Philip?
And I decided to go for it. So I went out.
Yeah, Philip, if I could quickly, if I could quickly ask you a question, because a topic that's coming up here at our school at London Institute of Photography is quite often what level of technical knowledge is required before you can actually start assisting. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? How good of a photographer were you when you start to assist?
I was, good question. I'm glad you brought that up, actually. That's a very important question. And I actually had no knowledge. I literally would, it was a hobby for me. It was an interest. So I went around just taking pictures of my friends and doing things like that. So I had very little knowledge, if not any knowledge. I knew the basics about photography, but when it came to lighting, studio lighting, and all this type of thing, it was completely new to me. So I think that isn't a hindrance I suppose if you find the right photographer in many ways, but I think a lot of photographers aren't that concerned about how much knowledge you might have initially. It depends on the job and the position and what you're shooting for. A lot of the times a photographer might use you as a second assistant or even a third assistant if you haven't got that knowledge and background, but then you can learn from the other assistants as well. So I think it's a difficult question because the more knowledge you can get, the better it will be for you. But that is something you can get by working with someone who's prepared to teach you. And you'll pick it up very quickly and you'll learn very quickly when you're actually in a studio situation or location situation. Personally, I didn't have any background in it at all. So I was literally learning from scratch. And as I said, after 2 years, I decided to go as a photographer. So on that basis, you learn very quickly, you make your connections. And so I wouldn't see it as a hindrance. I would make it clear to a photographer that that is the situation that you're in, that you don't have that much experience. But today, you know, there is an opportunity to go and work at a lighting company for a little while just to gain experience with lighting, occasion to go and work at rental companies where you can get experience with working with different types of cameras. I mean, nowadays, digitally, you know, the digital side of things in many ways are almost more complicated, I guess. Things were a lot simpler when it was just film. But now, you know, the technical aspects of it are becoming kind of more of an emphasis, I think. But I wouldn't consider it a hindrance. So don't let that stop you pursuing what you want to do. I mean, a lot of people studying is another route, which a lot of you people are doing, and people do every year, obviously. We've got lots of courses going on, masters, etc. I did not go that route, basically because I wanted to get into it and learn as an apprentice. Did I regret that? I don't think I did. At one time, I did think I would like the opportunity to experiment and develop as my knowledge of photography by studying it more and learning historically the aspects of photography and photographers. But in the end, I got too busy and I just carried on doing what I was doing, which I don't have any regrets about. And for me, it was probably best that it went that way. Anyway, I wouldn't know otherwise. So I made some great contacts when I was assisting. I learned a lot of how to work in that environment at that time. I learned a lot about the lighting. I learned about aspects needed to work as a professional photographer in a commercial world. And as you develop your ideas and as you develop as an assistant, ideas come into mind. Learning the techniques helps you formulate new ideas about how you want to progress, what you would consider your style or your look. And I found when I initially went out as a photographer, I tended to initially try and work in the way that a photographer did that I worked for. So it gave me that security knowing that I knew that worked. But as you grow and develop as a photographer and an artist, I guess you develop your own style and approach and technique to how you want to proceed with photography. I mean, a thing with, as a professional photographer for me too, which is very important, is you just don't make mistakes. You know, you have to have that knowledge and background when you get to the stage of being a photographer. For one, it gives you absolute confidence in what you're doing. You can achieve what you need to achieve because you've got the knowledge and background to enable you to do that. And you won't make mistakes because you can't make mistakes in our industry. You have to have backup systems in place that will prevent you from making any mistakes. And I think this also applies in today's world. You know, it's just knowing what needs to be done and what you need to do to ensure that mistakes can't happen. And as I said, as you go along in your career while you're actually shooting, I found personally that I developed my particular style and way of shooting as I was actually working commercially. And then I found I shot fashion. I did fashion photography for about 10, 15 years. And then I got and I was very fortunate. I worked for some big brands in the UK, in London. I worked abroad as well. And I got a little bit tired of the fashion world at that point. So I decided to reinvent myself as a photographer. And hence why, like Holger, I'm gone into more sports brands, outdoor brands, probably more advertising, I guess, than the fashion world. And I am glad I did that. So the point is really what I'm saying is that you can reinvent yourself in a career in photography. You don't have to stick to one thing. If there's something in particular, you know, we all change our minds, we all progress in different ways. So if something in particular grabs your attention, something you want to do, reinvent yourself and go for it. I mean, I was quite fortunate in my case that I got the break because Speedo booked me, even though I didn't have a lot of sports brands at my work in the time. It was a fashion portfolio. They booked me to do a shoot for them. And that basically started to get me into the sports and that kind of branding, outdoor brands. Okay, this is one of the Speedo images. This will bring me on to subjects like teams and people you work with and people you know, fortunately for me, Speedo I worked with, I think for 10 plus years, possibly 12 years in total, which has been fantastic for me as a brand to work for. And because it's an exciting brand, and the creativity with it is very good too. And also they have good budgets. So we did have good budgets. So you're able to facilitate what you can produce for them in a creative field. So this is one of the shots of Speedo, the guy diving in. Shot, actually, I was in the water with an underwater camera. It was at the end of the day, you can see the sun's just about setting there in the distance, and it was shot in Tenerife. And that was actually sometime in February, I think. It was quite cold. But that was, I mean, it's one of the shots I particularly proud of and like because it's quite a tricky shot to get and to get sharp and to get it where I wanted to get it. So I was very happy with the end result.
Yeah.
The thing with
Philip,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we've got a question from Gina. She asks, before you were well known, were clients concerned that you covered a wide range of subject matter from fashion to sports, etc.? I always thought that you had to focus on one area.
That's a good question, and that's something I was actually going to come up to later. You do. I mean, I reinvented myself and focused more on outdoor brands and sports brands. So that was my transition into that genre. Before that, I was in the genre of fashion. And I do believe you have to ideally be seen to be in the genre, whether it's fashion, food, or lifestyle photography. I think your knowledge has to be diverse. You have a good range of diversity with regards to knowledge, but you need to be seen as specializing in a field, because I think then clients will book you for that, knowing that is what you want to do and that is what you're good at. So it's a good question. I think showing too much diversity, especially, which has always been the case in photography. When I first started as a photographer, it was the same thing. And I think it relates now. I mean, at one time, I think I used to see on websites such a range of images. You know, people were doing everything. But I think if you're really serious about the commercial environment and the advertising world, then you need to really focus on a genre. There's no reason why you can't change that later on and go into a different area if that's what you want to do. But initially, for sure, it's a good question. This is another Speedo shoot. What, again, like Holger mentioned, this was shot in Mallorca, and as Holger mentioned, the exciting thing about sports and lifestyle and shots like that, it's the action, the movement. You know, it's I love shooting action shots. I love moving myself as much as they move. So it gives, for me personally, it gives me the buzz that I want to get out of it. And I think there's so much more opportunity for spontaneity, capturing a moment, just capturing those instances where there's a sense of reality. And I think for me, that's very strong. You know, it's very important for me to see that. I love a sense of reality. I love using the environment and the images. I think especially nowadays, it's always on the back of my mind, show the environment, show the beauty of it, you know, with the idea that we need to take more care of it, we need to look after it, and we need to show it at its best so people can look at it and say, wow, that's amazing. Let's make sure we can keep that environment as it is. And then with Speedo, I was fortunate to get involved in the underwater photography, which again, I managed to develop with some of my other clients. So this was great. I literally, the client said to me, look, we need to do some underwater stuff. So I got an underwater camera. I went into a swimming pool in my neighbor's house and I took some pictures of them underwater just so I could learn how to do it. I got my paddy and there I was. I started shooting underwater. So it happened quite quickly and I just had to get it done very quickly so I could do the job basically. So, you know, do what you need to do to make it happen. And then I have to say, I really love the underwater stuff. It's working with light in a different way. It's working with a totally different medium. And it's exciting. It gives you a new way of seeing things. Not only that, but you're underwater and there's no one else with you apart from the model. So you've got no client looking at you or telling you anything. You've got no creative directors, just you in the water with your camera and the model or the athlete. And you can just go for it, be as creative as you want. So it's very exciting and very enjoyable. I mean, what's critical with underwater photography, first of all, is to make sure you have clear water, very important, clean, clear water. No fogginess or mess. And, you know, if you're shooting something like Speedo or then get the right people to be in there, get swimmers, you know, things like that. And any sport activity or anything like that needs to be swimmers or any people that work in that profession or that sport. And then I also with Speedo, I got a great opportunity of working with a lot of the top swimmers in the world. And also I've managed to work with some of the top athletes, which has been great. And that's inspiring in itself. And if you love sport, it's a great area to get into. I started photographing sports brand. I was given the opportunity to work with athletes, which is inspiring. The dedication, determination that they have for their sport and the ability they have is quite astounding. And you suddenly become very aware of how incredible the human body is and what can be achieved with it. And sport is a great way of illustrating that. So here we have Florent Manodou, who's a French champion, and also Ryan Lochte, who can be a little controversial, but he's actually a lovely guy and a great swimmer. People like Phelps as well, and various other swimmers. I've fortunately got to photograph all around the world, which is fantastic.
Yeah. I've got another question here from Gina that actually relates to this. She asks another one, very roughly, how many times do your sports models need to do the action before you usually get your shot? And to what extent do you plan the exact shots before you take it? Do you get something like a layout, for example, or is it pretty much freestyle?
Another great question. Briefing is very important, I think, from the creative director or the client. I mean, normally commercial jobs, especially like something like Speedo, you'll work through an agency and the client will work with the agency. So your brief and your ideas of how the shoot should be done is through the agency. I tend to get quite involved in that side of it as much as I can, so we can discuss ideas, concepts, how things can be achieved. You don't always get that opportunity. You know, some clients, you literally sometimes just have to turn up on the day and get on with it. But I think it's very important that you get the proper briefing before you do a shoot. So yeah, you can start to visualize in your mind, and when you see the locations or where you're doing, whether it's in the studio or on the location, you can visualize in your mind how you see the image forming. Clients generally will give you a visual of what they're trying to achieve. A lot of what I do, because I shoot on very spontaneously and very always moving, I tend to not shoot tethered, I tend to shoot to card, because I move with the athletes a lot, or swimmers, or the models. So I generally will aim, if the client gives me an image, a visual to follow, I will first of all achieve that within what I do. So I'll get the image they need, but they know that I'm going to give them a lot more, and I'll work around it. And I think that's the key, is to give them what they want, but give them a lot more that they don't expect. But also, it's a fine line, don't overdo it. Yeah. But I think nowadays, what you do have nowadays with the digital world is all the formats you have to sort of cover. Mm. And I think in some ways that's quite an advantage for us, because we shoot around things a lot. So you're covering the different formats, but you're also able to offer different angles, different positions, anything that often create those surprises. And it is those, and that's what you want to do in the end. You know, you want to surprise the client. Okay, that's your visual, looks great, love it, we'll achieve that, but this is also what you can have. And most of the time, they'll go for what you do as extra, because they suddenly realize, wow, that's great. Mm-hmm. And that's the satisfying thing, I think, in the end, is that that's where you can have your impact a lot on a shoot, is to show them what they could have and then try and give them something that's better than what they initially looked at. Have any other questions on that at the moment while we're doing?
Not at the moment. I've got one. I want to know which camera you're using.
That's a very good question. Well, through COVID, I haven't actually changed cameras. I've been shooting with the 1DX2 for quite a while, but obviously the talk quite recently, over the last year or two, I suppose, there's been the mirrorless cameras. I tend to shoot Canon, and I tend, because my stuff's a lot of action work, I tend to shoot mostly that format, not Hasselblad or Phase 1, purely because the maneuverability I have with those Canons, etc. I'm at the stage where I'm thinking I'll probably go on to mirrorless at some point pretty soon. But I think I'm going to stick with Canon for that. What about you, Holger? What do you use?
Nikon.
Nikon.
Yeah, Nikon.
The funny thing is, when I used to shoot film, I used Nikon, and then when I went digital, I went to Canon.
I used to shoot like a medium format for a while. I also like for action and sports, and I got so fed up. It's such a slow system, and it tends to crash a few times during the shoot. Yeah, because the like Hasselblad or this one, they just simply don't have the, let's say, them as a company. They're just simply not as large as Canon or Nikon, and I'm not able, I personally think, hopefully no one from Hasselblad or Phase 1's hopefully not listening here, but I just simply feel that they're just simply not as reliable as Canon or Nikon. I mean, literally, you can just like hammer a nail into the wall with a Canon or Nikon, yeah. And they produce such an incredibly reliable system that's just perfect for action photography, right?
Yeah. Are you using mirrorless at the moment too? Are you gone that route, or?
Me personally, no. I just because I just recently bought the D800 850.
Yeah.
It was a big thing. I thought like, okay, shall I go mirrorless now? Because I just bought this a few years ago, and it's clear, like in 5-6 years time, everybody's going to shoot mirrorless, and they probably at one point they're going to stop developing the system any further. So you're kind of in a bit of a cul-de-sac, really, in a dead-end road, I think. But I mean, I've shot many jobs really, like on Sony cameras, for example. I have a Panasonic as well, and they're just amazing cameras, I must say, really.
Actually, they are amazing cameras.
Yeah,
Now you mentioned it, I worked recently with the SR, which I found great. I mean, for what I do with sport, I found it a little bit restricting, but I think for landscapes or portraits or anything like that, it'd be amazing.
We've got a few more questions. Very good, guys. Keep it coming, please. Yeah.
Yep.
Gina, very good. Yeah, she wants to know why you are considering mirrorless over DSLR.
Well, I think it comes, the technology improves as you go along with each camera. I mean, the trouble, it's a bit of a fight for me because I would quite happily stick with what I've got, but you do, every time you upgrade a system, certain things are within that new system that actually are pretty useful. The autofocus on these tends to be extremely good, and the tracking on these becomes extremely good, which are all quite useful tools. I mean, I feel like I'm sort of saying things I thought I'd never say, because one of the things that I used to pride myself on, which I'm sure you did as well, Olga, when you're shooting on film and you've got the old Pentax 6.7 or the cameras like that, you would manually focus and shoot away, no tracking, you tracked. So these are all skills we had as photographers, you know, and I feel those skills are still there and we can still use them, but the technology enables to do a lot of that for us.
We've got another question from Gemma. She asked about the Micro Four Third system, if you have considered this. She asks, which part of the mirrorless system makes it more limiting for sports as you described? I must say, sorry, I don't want this talk to become like some sort of like a geeky tech talk, but I must say it's such an important part of photography.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm looking into it at the moment. And I mean, you know, things haven't been that busy over COVID, which I think a lot of people are going through. So I'm looking into these various bits at the moment. I'm liking what I see at a certain level with regards to mirrorless. But I do like the solid action of the Canon 1DX2 or now obviously there's 1DX3. I think the nice thing with the mirrorless is you have the bigger files, which is, you always think could be useful and might be a useful thing to have. So I think my way of working, if I go ahead and change cameras, would be to have a mirrorless as my second camera, but then have maybe, which I could use for video as well, and have a main camera, which would be the camera I feel would be more suitable for my type of work. So I think in the end with cameras, there's so much choice, there's so much out there. It's what you decide you're comfortable with and what you would like to work with.
Before we move on with your talk, just sorry, because everybody's asking those technical questions. I also want to make another comment here. Don't you think? I mean, I tried out a lot of mirrorless cameras nowadays, and don't you think that the focus is a bit slower than of a really good DSLR? Let's say like with the Canon or Nikon, it's just like, honestly, like the moment you press the shutter release button, the focus is there. I mean, it goes like like this. There's virtually no lag. And I recently worked with a few mirrorless cameras, and they were pretty good, but it was not that instantaneous as with a DSLR camera. It's just like, I don't know, I always feel it's a bit like, it's just still looking for the focus a bit. And it's just not, it's straight away there.
I can see that. I mean, to be honest with you, you've probably tried out a lot more than I have. I'm at the stage where I'm thinking about it. But I mean, the only thing I've heard a lot of good things about them is the tracking system on them seems to be particularly good. I know Sony were, I know a few friends in PU and colleagues who have been using that, and they say the tracking on it is amazing. So, you know, I think you've got to try them out like you've done, and then find out what suits you, I think, and depending on your genre.
Gemma seems to be agreeing to something. She says, yes, it's bloody annoying. I'm not too sure what she's referring to. Maybe it's the focus, or maybe it's something else, but thanks a lot, guys. Keep it coming, please. Whenever you have any questions, The focus, that's right. Yeah. High five from me, Gemma. Yeah. Cool. Let's go back to your talk.
Now I'm going to come on to, I became a lifestyle photographer, and what I like about lifestyle and sports is the reality of it, the capturing of a moment, and the feeling for nature and the environment, as well as the product I am photographing. I believe, like I know all of us believe, in the valuing of photography and imagery. And, you know, a lot of that has escaped, I think, over the last few years with the increase in digital photography. But it's vitally important, and it's something for the group I have, Photographers United, it's one of our key points, is the important to value photography and imagery and professionalism. So people that influence me, I suppose, people I've looked at and I've thought, you know, in regards of past photographers, I mean, people like Cartier-Bresson, Avedon, Lindbergh, Jürgen Teller, Nadir, Pamela Hansen, Irving Penn, Guy Bourdin, Ellen van Unwerth. These are just some of the photographers that I've looked at through the years, and I've always admired their work and what they've done. There's another guy called based in LA. In fact, I met him in a cafe when I was out in LA last year before lockdown. Capsule Philip Dixon too. He always took lovely pictures. They're quite an eclectic mix, but I think that's the thing with photography and what we do is you have influences from all sorts of genres and all areas. You know, at one time when I was when I worked commercially, I never used to look at other people's work. I always just used to sort of keep on my track, just go with my look and my style, and just develop that more and more and more. So I very rarely looked at other people's work, and it's only in the last few years that I've started to look at other work and be inspired by it. And I kind of think, you know, sometimes you do things for a reason. At the time, I didn't need to. Now I do, and I feel it's a great thing to do. So it's always worth doing, looking at lots of work, getting lots of inspiration from other people. So the other, I don't know if I wanted to bring out the point about assisting again, because I do think it's important, if you can, to get some assisting in. I think you've done it, Holger, haven't you?
Yeah, I used to assist an annual report photographer for about 5 years.
Yeah.
All the Pentax 6.7, like
great cameras.
Yeah. Walking around atomic power stations with the like 6.7, yeah. Being in a helicopter, you know, like approaching on the wind turbines and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I think what you're saying, I mean, I think it's vital. I think, you know, even if you feel you want to go out as a photographer, just get some time in assisting, because it is such benefit to people, I think. I think so anyway, and I'm sure you must think so, because you learn so much, and you learn about working in the industry, which is key.
Yeah. Can I make one comment here for everyone? Because again, here at the school, assisting, obviously, you know, it's a topic that always comes up, and I must say nowadays, assisting or getting an assistant position can be really quite tedious. It can be really difficult, and because, you know, like I must say, I sometimes get like I don't know, like dozens of emails per week, like people applying for an assistant position, really, and it's just a noise basically, and it's really difficult, I feel, to actually maybe get to the photographer where you want to get to. And I want to quickly share a really interesting tip here for you guys. Like some of my friends, they want to become assistants for really famous photographers, like mainly like fashion photographers and advertising photographers, and approaching them directly just never worked. I mean, they just like completely ignored them. Like, well, I mean, they didn't even reply to their emails or you know, pick up the phone. It was just literally like impossible. And they've done a really interesting, they came up with a really interesting concept that they start to become studio assistants in those studios where those really big photographers, really famous photographers go to. For example, Park Royal, Park Royal unfortunately has burned down a few months ago. I don't know if you've seen this. Yeah, and they're rebuilding it. Just in case if you don't know this, everyone, Park Royal is one of the photo studios. I mean, this is where Nick Knight would go basically. This is where Testino would go. I mean, like the really big ones. So a few of my friends have done this, and they started to be a studio assistant in those studios. It's almost like a spider and spider net. Yeah, you just wait there. You're not there because you want to be the studio assistant, which is, by the way, a really not that great job. Yeah, you have to break your back just carrying all the equipment around. You make coffee, and then you're gonna get a kick in the butt, basically, like when they start to shoot, because they think that you've got no business with them in the studio. Well, when then Nick Knight's first assistant then has a coffee break or a cigarette break or whatever, that's your moment. And you say like, yeah, so how's that being Nick Knight's first assistant? So what kind of guy is he? I mean, does he shout a lot? Is he actually really quite sweet? And so they basically became friends. They befriended those first assistants of those star photographers. And that was their way in. As you have already mentioned, they started just as a cable carrier, third assistant, fourth assistant. Then they gradually moved up to the second assistant. And then when finally, then Nick Knight's first assistant then retires, then it's not Nick Knight who's going to find a new assistant. It's his leaving first assistant who's going to find a new assistant. And they all ended up being as assistant for those star photographers like Miles Aldridge, Nick Knight, etc. And I thought like, it's a really interesting way to actually go to an environment that's actually not so promising as such, but just because you're like in the same environment as those superstar photographers, and you just wait there until your moment comes, and then you just become friends with those assistants. I thought that's actually a really clever idea.
Yeah, and I think like I mentioned before is trying to work with a photographer that you particularly want to do that kind of work for, that genre. And that's what I did when I eventually got to work with Richard Imrie in London. I assisted him for about 1.5 years, and he was a fashion photographer, and he traveled the world doing his photography. As a result of that, when I became a photographer, because I'd made enough contacts and met the right people, but don't forget, don't tread on any toes. You make the but I never you go and find your own clients basically, and then you build yourself up from there. But since then, I've been through my career so far as a photographer, I've had a lot of opportunity to travel around the world. India, Siberia, Nepal, Morocco, South Africa, throughout the US, Canada, Alaska, Iceland, Zimbabwe, Namibia, throughout Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Belize, Seychelles, everything. So lots of locations, which I consider myself very blessed to have been to. And I think, it's important to try and decide, I mean, it's a difficult one nowadays, because obviously traveling like that nowadays, obviously at the moment is pretty well non-existent. I would think when we come out of that, you've got to think of, is traveling going to be that accessible? Is it also going to be the right thing to do to a certain extent? So lots of question marks at the moment, but that for myself, I was able to do that, and I felt very lucky and very fortunate to do that. The reasons why I love working on location is it requires spontaneity. It requires adaptability, because you need to be able to adapt to an environment, to weather conditions, to location conditions, anything like that. And it needs professionalism. You get out of anything what you put into it. And what I love about it is the excitement of a different land, a different culture. And you can use all that land, that culture and everything in your imagery, and bring out the best in your images. So it's, it tells a story, you can create a story, you can make a story, you can invent a story, it's all fantastic. I think you do need a lot of discipline when in location. You've got to make sure you have the right team. And the key to a lot of any photo shoot really is preparation. Preparation is vital.
Yeah. can I ask you, Philip, because also another question here that also really quite often comes up at the institute is to build a rapport with this with the models that moment, yeah. And your work has a really strong like a lifestyle element to it. It is about the moment. It's working with athletes, but it also looks very carefree. It looks very spontaneous, yeah. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you tackle this? Are you just naturally a super easygoing person that everybody loves? Do you have certain techniques to get that out of the people? How do you do this?
That's a good question, and quite a difficult question to answer, because I think a lot of it does come down to individuality and circumstance in many ways. I mean, for me, the elements I find very important on the shoot are the team. It's very important. You have a right team around you that understand what you're trying to achieve, in a sense. That's very important. And then I think for me, it's about creating an atmosphere and creating an approach that is enjoyable, relaxed, but focused. So I think I work very hard when I'm on a shoot, which I'm sure a lot of people do, to create the right atmosphere on a shoot and try and get the best out of people that I can get, which is obviously what we all try and do, and achieve. I find that the way I shoot is also a good point. I try and shoot in quite a relaxed style. I try not to shoot tethered, so I move with them. I try and be part with them in what I'm doing. So I'm kind of mixed in with what they're doing. So we're working together, and that's what I think it's all about, really. It's about teamwork. It's about working together. The guys behind are watching my back, making sure everything's being done that needs to be done. And I'm focusing with the model or the athlete on getting what we need to achieve. And I think that's probably how it happens. Sometimes I wonder. Yeah, so it's entirely on approach, and that's something you learn as you go along too. I think when you first start, your focus is so much on just getting it right that a lot of this is something that develops as you develop as a photographer, especially in a commercial world as well as a personal world. And I think studio, I mean, you know a lot of studio work as well. I've done a lot of studio work for years as well. Not so much over the before COVID, I wasn't doing so much. I was mostly on location. But again, this is a lovely medium to work when you have the opportunity to control your light, to mold your light, to fit what you're looking for and what the client's looking for. And that can be fantastic too. I think both mediums really have their strong values. So, win-win. We can't go wrong when we're in the studio on location. It's a great opportunity to create, and I think that's what's fantastic about it. We were talking about, I put down a note here actually. Commercially, you're given a brief basically from your creative director. We spoke about that earlier, where the concept and the idea of what you're going to be doing is there visually, and it's up to you to satisfy that brief. And if you have the right team, the right light, the right concept behind you, it's like a Hollywood movie. If you have a great cast, a great visual interpretation, you have a great script, which is important, you're going to have a great movie. So it's making all the elements come together. And that's why I think it's very important that the photographer, which I think is sometimes lacking nowadays, is very much a part of the whole process, from concept to production to execution, and to final product, final post.
Yeah. Could you maybe show us an image, for example, where you could explain the relationship between, let's say, like the briefing, maybe a layout, and how you got involved?
I'll show you this. Sebago. Okay, this particular shoot, which was interesting. So actually, this was a great client to shoot for. This was the East Coast of America. It was around Boston, all that, which is stunning country. It really is beautiful, as you can see. So the interesting with this, actually, we went and shot. We had, and the way we shot on this particular story was we had stories. So there'd be ideas of a story around the house, a story out in the open, a story here, a story there. There'd be a couple of models, and then you shoot for 2 days with these models, and then the next 2 days you change models and you do different stories. So the concept were the stories, which is what I love, because I can shoot around a story, and it's great to be able to create a story rather than having a complete visual that's it, that's all we're having. So and this visual came out of while we were shooting. So we shot this, and then I was talking to the creative director at the time, and then we decided how could we show this best, because we wanted to show the environment and the landscape, and then obviously we needed to show the clothing and the model. I mean, this was just one image out of several. So then we came up with this idea actually while we were shooting, which was great, and it worked. I think it worked pretty well. And here, for example, the rugby players, English rugby team, this was shot for a company called Canterbury, and it was actually shot at Loughborough University. We had the background put in, where the layout was going to be. So this was fairly briefed, and this was indoor, and it was fairly static. So I could light it the way I wanted to light it, place the models, the athletes where we wanted to place them. And this was pretty well according to visual. So in this situation, I gave them what they wanted, which was this, but also we did variations on the theme.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, about the relationship between personal work and your commissioned work. So how you organize your own photo shoot, your personal photo, your own personal projects, and how this ultimately then influences and informs the type of jobs that you're going to get.
Yeah, I think that is very relevant, especially over the last few years. When I actually was, previous to that, the funny thing was, it was quite interesting. I don't know how it worked out like that, but I shot a little bit of editorial, but not a lot of editorial, yet I got a lot of commercial work. And when I was shooting a lot of commercial work, I actually, for one, didn't have a lot of time to do my personal work. And in fact, I didn't do any personal work for years. And it's only over the last few years that I've dedicated more time to doing personal work, whether it's locations, whether it's landscapes or people or whatever. And I suddenly realized how much of that I was missing by not doing it before. I think especially nowadays, clients want to see personal work. It's a very key aspect of showing your work. They want to see what you do because they want to know more about you. They want to know about what really makes you drive. And they get inspired by your personal work because your personal work isn't limited or restricted by being a commercial shoot. It's what you want to do. And that's what they want to see. So personal work is vitally important, I think. Organizing personal work is like when organizing tests. It can be a headache. It can be really hard to get everybody together at the same time. My interest has come into the environment and wildlife as much as anything. Having photographed people and sports and for so long, which I love and I still do, but my real, I've begun to, for personally, I've gone more interested in other aspects now. Personal work, I mean, I've done a few personal works with regards to sport, which, let me just plug something in, I might be able to show you. But also I've been veering towards landscapes and wildlife. And the reason for that is because I want to work in this area as well. Not as well, but I'm thinking of moving a little more in this direction. Purely because I want to work, I'm a big conservation person and environment person. and wildlife person. So I want to work in conservation. So what I want to be able to do is offer conservation companies the opportunity to create work for them, video and stills. So one reason why I've been making this my personal project is because I want to put out imagery that focuses on the environment and the wildlife to help create awareness of what's going on and how beautiful it is out there. The one blessed thing I have is I've traveled so many countries and seen so many beautiful places that you know, it kills me that a lot of these countries are getting, you know, where things are going. So I want to get involved in this as much as possible. So hence why I've gone in this way a little bit. So the first shot was shot in Namibia, a place called Sossusvlei, which is the sand dunes of the Namib. And it's, if you know, I just say to anyone, if you ever get the chance to go to Namibia, please go. It is the most stunning, beautiful country around. And then we went into Etosha National Park, where you had the wildlife, and I just love this of the two elephants sort of opposing each other, and you've got two heads on one end. Personally, it's just an image I quite like. And then we went to Dslr, which is I think 200+ trees. It's an old forest that's eventually gone. I mean, it's stunning, and there's just so much you can get out of it visually and can create. The actual top shot there was in Vietnam, the one with the trees, and then you have the seals. And I love that too, because it feels so warm and personal, and you feel like you're really into their time. And then you've got more desert, more sand dunes. And the bottom image was Thailand, which I also like. So that's just an example of maybe the sort of work I've been trying to do, which obviously at the moment is out of the question. But that's something I'm veering towards at the moment in that style of work. So, you know, I've been building also on my sportswear and just trying to get personal shots. You see that one?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, and we shot that in London under the A40 viaduct. But it's just, it's not the best shot I've got, but it's one of the shots. So it's just, I'm working on stories, basically. Mm-hmm. So again, important. I mean, I'm not doing enough of that at the moment, I guess, because I can't really. And I know a lot of us probably can't, but as Holger said, vitally important to do your personal work. Mm-hmm. And to make sure you show your clients your personal work.
Mm-hmm. I've got another question from Gemma. She asks, do you think it's possible for someone to have commercial clients and offer lifestyle or brand shots, shoots, and only shoot on location? That means without shooting in the studio.
Yeah. I think it is. You know, I think again, it depends what genre you go into. You know, I think if you go into that type of work and that's really what you focus on and that's your imagery, then that's what clients will book you for. I think if you know, you can, even working with charities, you know, can give you opportunities, especially if you're interested in documentary photography. You know, working with for charities. I did actually, I'm going to come to that and show you that, but I did a job a while back for Deaf Child Worldwide, and that's the first time I've ever done anything like that. And it was documentary style, but we had to, you know, they had an idea they wanted to project, and it was up to us to capture that imagery in such a way that we could project that idea, the concept of the idea for them. And I found that amazing. I really enjoyed every minute of that because it was documentary style. It was something completely different to what I'd done before. And I mean, it does bring me on to, it'd be interesting to hear what you think, Holger, but it brings me on to the point that actually any genre you do is good because it's teaching you something. And you can use your experience from any of these sections in whatever you decide to do. So don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to try different genres. You know, if someone wants to book you for something or you want to do a project on something, just do it. You know, the experiences you gain from it will always benefit you in whatever you do. I mean, the other point I was going to bring up in a commercial sense is, photography is very much a business in the commercial sense. We are in a business. We are in the business of providing a service to our clients and getting paid for it, earning money and earning a living to enable us to buy these expensive cameras and expensive software and all things like that. So you've got to think of it as a business. And in order to do that, you have to take into consideration certain aspects of that business. First of all is making sure that when you get a client, you give the client what they need plus more, and you keep that client. Recurring clients are so important. If you can keep the client coming back, then you can have a good sustainable business. And that's key. And I mean, that's something I'm sure Holger's had the same thing, but that's something I've actually very satisfied about so far with my career is I tend to keep clients. I think for 2 years or more, they come back. And this is a very important factor. But when you get out there into the commercial world, work in such a way and be the type of person that they want to come back to. And I'm also going to quickly go on to something a little bit more straightforward, but it's very important with business as well. I know it's sort of veering slightly away from maybe photography, the imagery aspect of it, but it is business. Intellectual property. I'm going to bring that up because I think it's something that is so important. The definition of intellectual property refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs and symbols, names and images used in commerce. So that's your intellectual property. In photography, it's copyright and usage rights. And as a professional photographer, it is vital you protect your IP, your copyright. It is essential to make sure you keep your copyright on all your images. I know sometimes it's not always possible, but you have to weigh up the odds and decide if it's something you want to do, because it becomes an individual decision in the end. But hold on to your copyright. I'm sure at some point you will probably have a talk which goes into more detail about this. So I'll leave it at that, but just say that's very important. And as you're running a business, certain things you should have in place. You should have your terms and conditions in place, contracts in place, and your IP. These are very important factors you must have in place when you work as a commercial photographer. Then I suppose it could bring you on to the idea of agents. I don't know if that's something anyone has thought about or been thinking about. It's something I've done throughout my career so far, as I've always had agents in different countries. And I think for me, it works because when I'm busy, the agent is still pushing my work and trying to get me more work. I am secure in the fact that I know all the relevant quotes, the jobs, invoicing being done properly. I know the rates are being negotiated and applied appropriately, and all copyright and usage rights are being met. So I know all that's being done in the background. I know you pay a commission for that. And just so everybody tends to know, the commission tends to be 25%. But it's something to think about as well as you progress in your career, if you want to be represented.
Okay, Gemma just replies because she asked if you had agent representation or if the clients come to you directly.
Yeah, I have agents representation. I mean, clients, it depends on the agreement you have with your agent. I've always tend to have had the agreement that whatever clients come in, the agent deals with. There's something kind of nice about not having to discuss money with your client. It's done by the agent. And what I tend to like is the agent knows the market, knows what's expected, knows what usages are being used, understands copyright, understands how to put, how to keep the client happy in that basis, how to work with the client, budgets, all that type of thing. Yeah, actually, one other thing, just while we're on all that, is when you're discussing rates as well, always check certain items, what it is being used for, whether it's web, social media, advertising, in-store posters, where is it being used, territories, whether it's worldwide or which countries it's being used, and how is it being used, digitally or print, and identify a cost for each. How long is it being used is the time period of usage. you should agree a period of usage time. So all these elements are very important when it comes to rates. I mean, a lot of this can be included in your rate, or they can be added on to your rate, especially when it comes to usage fees and territory.
Do you know this really handy, that might be interesting for all of us involved here. Do you know this really handy usage rate calculator on the AOP webpage?
Yeah, I have used it.
Yeah, don't want to go there now, but
No.
anyone who's interested, you can please check this out. If you could talk a little bit more about Photographers United.
Yep, good timing. I was just on that page. I'm going to talk a little bit about Photographers United. I started Photographers United, I think about two and a half years ago, maybe a little more. I can't remember now, but it was purely on the basis of bringing people together. I suddenly realized a lot of us were sitting at our desks on computer screens, and not a lot of us were communicating. So I wanted to bring professionals together and sustain and maintain the industry as much as we could. I wanted to unite everybody so we could start talking to each other. And also I started a group really to support each other primarily in all aspects of the industry, to talk about technical stuff, to talk about cameras, lighting, talk about, you know, clients approaching you with visuals, all this sort of stuff. And actually we've spoken about so far this evening.
It is mainly a Facebook group.
Mainly a Facebook group. I have built a website. We're working on that at the moment. So it's growing. We have a committee in the group now too as well, which is great. So we're all working together. But I think it's a good setup. And AOP are involved as well, and they know about us, and we talk to them regularly. So it's all good. And I think that's the whole point of it really, is that we all communicate together, the organizations and individuals.
Who can apply for PU?
The main requirement is you have commercial work, you have a website, and you have, I can understand at the moment you might not have insurance in place, but normally when you're in the working mode, you would have insurance in place as well, public liability insurance and the normal insurance. There is also a student, graduate and assistants group, which you can also join as well, if you're either one of those. I can flick through some more pictures. I don't know if anyone has anything up there they want me to specifically talk about. Oh, there's one shot I've done, which I will share with, which I did, which was part of that talk when I mentioned about the charity Deaf Child Worldwide. That's quite an, you know, we all have these images. I think all your images need to have an emotional relation for you, something you relate to in an emotional way. This particular image does for me, because it was while I was shooting for Deaf Child Worldwide, which was the documentary style photography that I hadn't done before. So it was really interesting to do it. And this little boy was with his mother, but he was basically begging on the side of the street. And if you look at him, he's so beautiful. And the remit we had was to show how deaf children become isolated, and how Deaf Child Worldwide is trying to eradicate that isolation and bring deaf children into society. It's places like India, unfortunately, it wasn't done, hopefully it is now, as a normal way of living. So they tended to be very isolated with children if they were deaf. What parents used to do is sort of old medicine tales, or they actually used to, if a child couldn't hear, they used to put broken eggshells into their ears, thinking that would cure their hearing. But in fact, that's what made them deaf. So a lot of children became deaf through that sort of belief. But this boy, I've always wondered, whenever I see this picture, I always wonder what happened to him. And I think it's going to haunt me forever. You know, I think images, that's the wonderful thing about photography, is the story that got you there, the story of it happening and the story after.
Do you, I've got two questions here. One is from Eunice. He asks, which camera do you use for personal work?
I use the same cameras, actually. I do use the same cameras. I don't change that. I keep with what I've got. I mean, I still have all my 6-7 Pentax cameras, And I know one day I will get back to them. I haven't done it yet, but I will. But I tend to use the same cameras, or I will try out new cameras sometimes just to see how I feel about them when I'm shooting my personal work.
I've got another question myself. Do you ever produce personal work abroad, or do you?
I do, especially the landscapes. And I mean, I love locations and I love epic locations. So for me, trying to do that as part of my personal work, not only do I get to see this amazing place, I also get to photograph it. So I try and do, but also if I'm photographing sports, I also try and mix it up between studio and location. Personal work. I think it's good to show a good balance between the two. And then I've actually made 2 documentaries at Everest Base Camp for the BBC, which was pretty amazing. And that was, it's interesting actually. I enjoyed that because it was going to a completely new area from what I was used to in commercial photography. And I was interested how they have quite a small team. I mean, when we went up there, it was initially just myself, the cameraman and the director. And we went up there and filmed for, I think, we were up there for 2 months for the whole time. And the director stayed with us for about 5 weeks, I think, and then he went off. So then it was just myself and the cameraman covering everything. So I was quite surprised at how the team gets reduced to a very small team when you're making documentaries like that. And in fact, you end up directing it, being the cameraman and being the producer all at the same time. And that's something I feel I've carried on to use in my experiences since then. And underwater, obviously, the shot you can see there above the 2 girls is shot in Belize, and that was underwater. So having done underwater for Speedo, I decided to try and incorporate underwater for my other clients as well, just to offer them something different. What I'd like to show you actually is an old, there we go. Okay, this is the image. You see it? The black and white. So this was actually a shot done in South Africa, and it was for Speedo. And this was actually a rugby team with a couple of models in there as well. And I shot it on the 110A camera, which is a bellows camera, a beautiful camera. It was specifically made that you could then put a Polaroid back on it. And at the time of 665 Polaroid, you would peel off, it was black and white, you'd peel it off and you could then process the neg and use the neg to do your prints from. And it would give you quite an unusual effect. Basically, that's it. So I think that probably covers everything I was going to say, mostly. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to chat about.
Emma's last question, she asked, actually asked about post-production specifically. Is it your style or the client's style that takes priority?
That's a very interesting question, Jeff.
Yeah. Was it part of the brief?
It depends on the client. I have to say that I'm very much, when I shoot personally, I very much want my reality. I like capturing a moment, I like reality. I do very little retouching on my images. I'll do a bit of enhancing here and there, maybe a bit of contrast and a bit of whatever, but I very rarely do any major retouching on my images. Most of the images you've seen tonight, for instance, and on my website are pretty well unretouched. You know, I've just maybe increased the color a little bit or done this or done that, but it's mine. And that's what I give to the clients. Sometimes the client will say they want this particular look, and obviously you need to provide that as much as you can, but I would also offer them an alternative how I see it.
And then Eunice asked if you like to be photographed yourself.
Interesting question. I'll ask Eunice that. Does she like being photographed herself?
Yeah. So Eunice, he's a gentleman. He's one of our students. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sorry. Apologies. Yes. Do you like being photographed yourself?
And he said he does not like to be photographed.
No, I know.
A lot of other photographers, I guess a lot of photographers rather prefer to stay behind the camera, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm with Eunice. I totally agree. I'm not good this side of a camera. In fact, something like this I find quite hard to do. Once I get into it, it's fine, but initially, But actually, it's interesting. I think recently, since the last few years, I love taking portraits of people, because you look at it, when you see people's faces on the finish print of after you've taken that picture. I mean, people's faces are incredible, so different, and certain features stand out, certain features, you know, it's amazing. So I've certainly got into what's the word, concentrating on portraits a lot more, and seeing how different people are. And actually everybody's beautiful, which is fantastic. You know, however they look, everybody looks amazing on a picture.
Thank you so much, really, for joining us. For your
I'm going to say thank you to Marie, and thank you, Gemma, thank you, Eunice, thank you, everybody who was there, and thank you, Holger. That was fantastic.
Okay,
Thanks
fantastic.
for your time.
Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers.
Be well,
Bye-bye.
be safe.
Be safe, absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.